Chosen one, listen carefully, because this message is not about coincidence, and it is not something you should brush aside as just another passing word. There is something connected to the person whose name begins with the letter J that God is bringing into the light. What was hidden is beginning to surface. What was concealed behind silence, distance, confusion, or carefully chosen words is being revealed. You may have sensed it without understanding it. You may have felt that something was missing, something was being withheld, something about J did not completely add up. And now, God is telling you to pay attention, not with fear, but with discernment. Chosen one, there are moments when God allows you to see what you were not ready to see before. There are seasons when you ask why someone suddenly became distant, why their behavior changed, why their words stopped matching their actions, or why your spirit could never completely settle around a particular situation. You may have tried to explain it logically. You may have blamed yourself. You may have wondered whether you were imagining things. But sometimes the discomfort you feel is not there to destroy your peace. Sometimes it is there to awaken your discernment. The person with the initial J may have been carrying something they did not know how to tell you, something hidden beneath their outward behavior, something they protected with silence, something they hoped would remain undiscovered. And God, in His timing, has a way of bringing hidden things into the light, not always to embarrass someone, not always to punish someone, but to free you from uncertainty. You have been asking for clarity, and clarity does not always arrive as a dramatic announcement. Sometimes clarity comes through patterns. Sometimes it comes through a conversation. Sometimes it comes through a sudden realization that makes everything from the past begin to make sense. You remember the strange moment. You remember the unanswered question. You remember the way Jay looked at you but did not speak. You remember the message that felt different. You remember the sudden silence. You remember the unexplained change. And now you are beginning to connect the pieces. Chosen one, do not rush ahead of God. Do not confront anyone simply because a message resonates with you. Do not accuse Jay of something you cannot verify. This revelation is not an invitation to become suspicious of everyone around you. It is an invitation to become more discerning about what deserves access to your heart, your energy, your trust, and your future. Because there is a difference between discernment and fear. Fear makes you assume the worst. Discernment allows you to observe. Fear tells you to react immediately. Discernment tells you to wait. Fear demands answers from people. Discernment allows God to reveal what needs to be revealed. And chosen one, God has not brought you this far to make you a prisoner of anxiety. He is teaching you how to recognize what is genuine without becoming consumed by what is deceptive. There is something about J that may have been hidden because the person was afraid of what would happen if you knew the truth. Perhaps they have been struggling with their feelings. Perhaps they have been keeping a decision to themselves. Perhaps they have been watching you from a distance while pretending not to care. Perhaps they have been carrying regret. Perhaps they have been hiding the real reason they pulled away. And this is where you need wisdom, because not every hidden thing is evil. Sometimes people hide because they are ashamed. Sometimes they hide because they are afraid. Sometimes they hide because they do not know how to communicate. Sometimes they hide because they are trying to protect themselves. And sometimes people hide because they know the truth would change the relationship. God is revealing something to you because your next season requires greater clarity than your previous season allowed. You cannot walk into a new chapter while constantly questioning what happened in the previous one. You cannot build peace on top of unanswered confusion forever. At some point, the truth has to come forward, and perhaps that is what is happening now. Chosen one, think about how many times you have felt that there was more to J than what you could see. There may have been moments when this person appeared completely unaffected by you, yet their actions told a different story. There may have been moments when they acted indifferent, but somehow they always knew what was happening in your life. They may have disappeared and returned. They may have watched silently. They may have acted as though they had moved on, yet somehow their presence kept appearing around you. You wondered why. You wondered what they wanted. You wondered whether they missed you. You wondered whether they regretted something. You wondered whether there was a conversation that never happened. And now, chosen one, you are being reminded that you do not need to force a door open when God can open it Himself. If J is meant to explain something, the explanation will come. If J is meant to apologize, the opportunity will come. If J is meant to confess something, the truth will find its way to the surface. And if J is not meant to remain in your future, God can reveal that too. This is why you must not become attached to one particular outcome. Your assignment is not to make the revelation fit your desire. Your assignment is to remain available to the truth. Because sometimes the thing God reveals is not the thing you expected. You may have expected God to reveal that J was secretly planning to return. Instead, God may reveal why you needed to let go. You may have expected God to show you that J secretly loved you. Instead, He may reveal that J was struggling with something that had nothing to do with your worth. You may have expected an apology. Instead, you may receive closure. And chosen one, closure is also a blessing. There are people who spend years waiting for someone else to explain what happened. They put their lives on hold, waiting for a message, waiting for a phone call, waiting for someone to finally say the words they needed to hear. But God does not require you to remain trapped in someone else's silence. Sometimes God gives you peace before He gives you an explanation. Sometimes He heals the wound before the person who caused it ever acknowledges it. Sometimes He removes your need for an apology because He has already shown you who you are. You are not defined by what Jay did. You are not defined by what Jay failed to say. You are not defined by whether Jay chooses you. You are not defined by whether Jay returns. Your identity does not depend on another person's recognition. Chosen one, hear this deeply: what is hidden cannot remain hidden forever. The truth has a way of becoming visible through time. Character reveals itself. Intentions reveal themselves. Patterns reveal themselves. And people eventually reveal what they have been carrying. That is why you do not need to chase. You do not need to investigate every detail. You do not need to search endlessly for signs. You do not need to create a story before the facts arrive. Be still, observe, pray, and let God separate truth from assumption. There may have been a reason you could never completely understand Jay. You may have felt that this person was both near and far at the same time. One moment they seemed emotionally present, and the next they became distant. One moment they seemed interested, and the next they acted as if nothing mattered. That inconsistency may have confused you deeply, but inconsistency itself can be information. You do not have to hate someone to recognize that their behavior is unhealthy for you. You do not have to call someone evil to admit that they are not ready to give you what you deserve. You do not have to destroy someone to protect yourself. You can simply step back. You can let God handle what you cannot understand. And perhaps Jay has been hiding something because they have been fighting an internal battle. Maybe they have been battling pride, maybe regret, maybe fear of rejection, maybe fear of vulnerability, maybe the consequences of a decision they made. Maybe they know they mishandled you. Maybe they know they lost something valuable. And perhaps they have not known how to face you with that truth. But chosen one, their inability to face their truth does not mean you must abandon yours. Your truth is that you deserve honesty. Your truth is that you deserve peace. Your truth is that you should not have to decode someone's behavior every day. Your truth is that love should not require you to constantly question whether you matter. God is teaching you something powerful through this situation. He is teaching you not to confuse mystery with destiny. Just because someone is difficult to understand does not mean they are your soulmate. Just because someone keeps returning does not mean they are assigned to your future. Just because you feel deeply does not mean you are required to stay. And just because someone has hidden feelings does not mean those feelings are automatically healthy enough to build a relationship upon. This is where spiritual maturity becomes important. Chosen one, you are entering a season where you cannot afford to make decisions purely from emotion. You need wisdom. You need patience. You need the ability to recognize fruit. Words are easy. Promises are easy. Feelings can change. But character is demonstrated over time. If Jay returns, watch the actions. If Jay speaks, listen to the consistency. If Jay apologizes, watch whether behavior changes. If Jay says they care, watch whether they treat you with respect. Do not be hypnotized by a dramatic confession while ignoring a repeated pattern. God does not need you to accept crumbs simply because they are finally being offered with beautiful words. Chosen one, perhaps this is why you have felt a shift lately. Something has changed. Maybe you are less emotionally attached than you used to be. Maybe you no longer feel the same urgency. Maybe you have stopped checking for messages. Maybe you have stopped wondering what Jay is doing. Maybe you have started focusing on your own life again. And that is significant. Because sometimes the greatest evidence that God is moving is not what another person does. It is what happens inside you. You begin to detach. You begin to breathe again. You begin to sleep peacefully. You begin to dream again. You begin to remember who you were before the confusion. You begin to understand that you can love someone and still release them. You can care about someone and still choose yourself. You can forgive someone without reopening the door. You can wish someone well without allowing them access to your future. That is freedom. And chosen one, perhaps Jay, has been hiding the fact that they realize they no longer have the same influence over you. They may have assumed that you would always be there. They may have assumed that you would always wait. They may have believed that no matter how much time passed, they could return whenever they wanted. But something changed. You changed. Your standards changed. Your understanding changed. Your relationship with God changed. And now the version of you that once tolerated confusion may no longer exist. This is why the revelation matters. Not because Jay is the center of your story, but because you are. The revelation is showing you what you need to know about the season you are leaving and the season you are entering. Chosen one, There are times when God reveals another person's hidden motives so that you can stop blaming yourself. You may have spent months wondering what you did wrong. You replayed conversations. You analyzed your messages. You questioned your appearance. You questioned your personality. You wondered if you were too much. You wondered if you were not enough. You wondered why someone could treat you warmly one day and coldly the next. But perhaps the issue was never your worth. Perhaps the issue was their capacity. And there is a huge difference. Someone can fail to recognize your value without your value becoming smaller. Someone can reject you without you becoming unworthy. Someone can misunderstand you without you becoming difficult to love. Someone can walk away without proving that you were never important. Do not let another person's confusion become your identity. Chosen one, God may be revealing this hidden truth because He wants you to stop carrying a burden that was never yours. You have carried questions that belong to J. You have carried emotions that belong to J. You have carried guilt that belonged to J. You have tried to solve a problem that only J could explain. And now God is saying, release it. You do not need to know everything to move forward. You only need enough truth to obey the next step. Maybe the next step is waiting. Maybe it is forgiveness. Maybe it is distance. Maybe it is a conversation. Maybe it is closing the door. Maybe it is allowing the relationship to develop naturally without forcing it. But whatever the next step is, let it be guided by peace and wisdom rather than obsession. Chosen one, there is another possibility you should consider. What if J has been hiding something good? What if they have been hiding a realization? What if they have been hiding the fact that they regret losing you? What if they have been hiding feelings they were too proud to admit? What if they have been watching your transformation from a distance? What if they have realized that the person they once underestimated became the person they can no longer ignore? If that is what God reveals, you still do not have to rush. Let them demonstrate it. Let truth become visible. Let intentions become actions. Let consistency replace confusion. You have learned too much to go backward simply because someone finally says what you wanted to hear months ago. Chosen one, this is a season where God is teaching you to distinguish between revelation and temptation. Sometimes the enemy will use your strongest desire to create a false interpretation. You want someone to return, so every coincidence looks like a sign. You miss someone, so every song feels prophetic. You dream about someone, so you assume God is telling you they are coming back. But spiritual discernment requires patience. Not every feeling is instruction. Not every coincidence is confirmation. Not every dream is a prophecy. And not every person who reappears belongs in your future. That is why you need peace. Peace allows you to wait without forcing. Peace allows you to observe without obsessing. Peace allows you to receive without clinging. And peace allows you to walk away without bitterness when something is no longer aligned with your purpose. Chosen one, if J has been hiding something, you do not have to expose them. God does not need you to become their investigator. You do not need to gather evidence to prove your intuition. You do not need to manipulate circumstances to make them confess. Let God reveal. Let life reveal. Let time reveal. And when the truth appears, have enough wisdom to receive it without becoming intoxicated by it. Because sometimes the truth you prayed for will require a decision you did not expect to make. You may discover that J cares deeply but is not ready. You may discover that J regrets what happened but cannot change the past. You may discover that J loves you but still cannot provide the consistency you need. You may discover that J has been hiding pain. Or you may discover that J has been hiding an entirely different intention. Whatever it is, do not let the revelation become another chain. The purpose of truth is freedom. Chosen one, remember that. The purpose of truth is freedom. God does not reveal something merely to make you more anxious. He reveals so you can walk in greater wisdom. And if the truth hurts, allow yourself to feel it. You do not have to pretend that revelation is painless. Some truths break the illusion before they heal the heart. Some truths make you cry before they make you grateful. Some truths feel like loss before you understand they were protection. But do not run back to the illusion simply because the truth feels uncomfortable. There was a reason you prayed for clarity. There was a reason you asked God to show you what you could not see. And when He begins showing you, trust Him enough to keep looking. Chosen one, the person with the initial J, may have been hiding something for longer than you realize, but God has not been absent during that silence. He saw every conversation. He saw every tear. He saw every moment you wondered whether you were imagining the connection. He saw every time you tried to move forward and found yourself thinking about what could have been. He saw the moments you felt forgotten. He saw the nights you asked why someone could come so close only to become distant. And He saw the version of you that kept believing there had to be an explanation. Now the explanation may be approaching, but before it arrives, God is preparing you for what it means. You are not going to receive the truth as the same person who once begged for it. You have grown. You have learned. You have become stronger. You have learned that silence does not always mean rejection. You have learned that distance does not always mean hatred. You have learned that attraction does not always equal assignment. And most importantly, you have learned that God's plan for you is bigger than one person's decision. So when J finally reveals what has been hidden, whether it is through words, actions, circumstances, or simply the undeniable truth of time, you will not need to lose yourself in the moment. You will be able to stand. You will be able to listen. You will be able to discern. And you will be able to decide. Because Chosen One, God is not just revealing what J has hidden. He is revealing who you have become. Chosen One, and this is where the story becomes deeper. Because what God is revealing about J is not simply about what happened between you and another person. It is about what was happening behind the scenes while you were trying to understand what you could see on the surface. There were conversations you were never part of. There were thoughts you never heard. There were decisions being made that you did not know about. There were emotions that were carefully controlled, words that were deliberately withheld, and moments when J may have wanted to say something but chose silence instead. You saw the outside, but God saw the entire picture. And sometimes that is why your intuition was so restless. You were responding to something you could not yet explain. You sensed a contradiction. You felt that the story you were being shown was incomplete. You heard one thing, but your spirit noticed another. You watched the actions, but something behind those actions seemed louder than the actions themselves. Chosen One, you were not necessarily imagining the difference. But you must understand that sensing something and knowing something are not exactly the same. God may allow you to perceive that something is happening without giving you the entire explanation immediately. Why? Because if He showed you everything at once, you might have reacted emotionally instead of spiritually. There are revelations that require preparation. There are truths that must be received by a heart that has learned patience. There are answers that would have destroyed you in an earlier season because you would have interpreted them through pain, insecurity, or attachment. But now you are different. Now you can hear something without immediately chasing it. Now you can recognize something without becoming consumed by it. Now you can understand that another person's hidden behavior does not have authority over your destiny. And that is exactly why the truth is becoming visible. J may have believed that keeping something hidden would protect the situation. Perhaps they thought silence would make the problem disappear. Perhaps they convinced themselves that time would erase the feelings. Perhaps they assumed you would eventually stop caring. Perhaps they thought they could move forward without ever addressing what happened. But hidden emotions do not always disappear. Unspoken decisions do not always remain buried. And unresolved situations have a way of resurfacing when the timing becomes right. Chosen One, maybe, J, has been carrying a conversation inside their mind for a long time. They may have rehearsed what they would say to you. They may have imagined your reaction. They may have wondered whether you would forgive them. They may have wondered whether you would still care. They may have wondered whether you had already moved on. And perhaps one of their greatest fears is that you have. Because there comes a moment when the person who once had access to your attention realizes that your attention is no longer guaranteed. They notice that you are quieter. They notice that you are not reaching out. They notice that you are no longer trying to explain yourself. They notice that you are not asking mutual connections about them. They notice that your life has continued. And that realization can awaken something inside a person. Sometimes it awakens regret. Sometimes it awakens humility. Sometimes it awakens jealousy. Sometimes it awakens the realization that they misunderstood your value. But Chosen One, do not confuse someone's awakening with your assignment to rescue them. That distinction matters. You are not responsible for completing another person's emotional journey. You can pray for them without carrying them. You can forgive them without returning to them. You can love them without allowing them to disrupt your peace. You can acknowledge their growth without becoming responsible for maintaining it. This is the maturity God is developing in you. You are learning how to love without losing yourself. You are learning how to care without controlling. You are learning how to hope without becoming desperate. You are learning how to wait without putting your life on pause. And, J, may be one of the people through whom this lesson became necessary. Chosen One, think about the strange timing of everything. Why did you meet when you did? Why did the connection become important? Why did things become complicated? Why did the distance happen? Why did the silence happen? Why did you experience a season where you could not get clear answers? Sometimes we assume that because something became painful, it must have been meaningless. But pain can become a classroom. A confusing relationship can expose patterns you never knew existed within you. A disappointing person can teach you boundaries. A broken connection can teach you self-respect. A period of waiting can teach you patience. And a hidden truth can teach you discernment. Perhaps J was never simply about J. Perhaps this entire situation was preparing you to become the person who could recognize what God sends next. Because imagine receiving something beautiful, while still being unable to distinguish consistency from manipulation. Imagine receiving a healthy relationship, while still believing that emotional intensity equals love. Imagine receiving an opportunity while still allowing fear to control your decisions. Imagine entering a new season while carrying all the assumptions from the old one. You would risk sabotaging what God is building because you had not yet learned how to handle it. So, sometimes God allows you to experience confusion long enough to develop clarity. He allows you to encounter inconsistency so that you learn to value consistency. He allows you to experience silence so that you learn not to beg for communication. He allows someone to walk away so that you learn that your identity remains intact when another person leaves. And now you are approaching the point where the lesson becomes revelation. Chosen one, there may be something J never told you about why they changed. Maybe there was another pressure in their life. Maybe there was something happening within their family. Maybe there was an internal conflict. Maybe they were afraid of commitment. Maybe they had convinced themselves that they were not worthy of what you offered. Maybe they had been hurt before and were protecting themselves. Maybe they were dealing with consequences from choices they made before you entered their life. And perhaps none of those explanations excuse the way they treated you. That is important. Understanding someone does not require excusing them. Compassion does not require abandoning boundaries. You can understand why someone behaved a certain way and still decide that the behavior was unacceptable. You can recognize someone's wounds without allowing those wounds to become weapons against you. Chosen one, this is one of the deepest lessons you are learning. You are not called to become the healer of everyone who hurts you. You are not called to enter every broken situation and repair it. You are not called to prove that your love can overcome someone's unwillingness to grow. There are battles you can pray over without personally entering them. There are people you can bless from a distance. There are situations you can surrender without solving. And perhaps J is one of those situations where God is telling you, let me handle what you cannot. Because when you try to control the outcome, you become emotionally attached to every little detail. You analyze every message. You monitor every silence. You search for meaning in every interaction. You become exhausted, but surrender changes the way you see. You stop asking, how can I make this happen? And you begin asking, God, what are you trying to show me? That question changes everything. Chosen one, what if the hidden thing is not merely about what J feels for you, but about what J has realized about you? Maybe they have realized that you were more genuine than they understood. Maybe they have realized that your patience was not weakness. Maybe they have realized that your kindness was not something they could endlessly take for granted. Maybe they have realized that your absence speaks louder than your presence once did. Maybe they have realized that you were not asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong person for the right things. And that realization can be painful. Because sometimes people only recognize what they had after they no longer have easy access to it. But you do not need to punish them for realizing late. You simply need to refuse to become smaller so that they can feel comfortable again. Chosen one, there is a version of you that used to explain yourself constantly. You wanted people to understand your intentions. You wanted them to know that you cared. You wanted them to know that you were not trying to hurt anyone. You wanted J to understand what you meant. You wanted them to know why you reacted. You wanted them to know why you pulled away. You wanted them to understand your heart. But there comes a point where you stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Not because you become cold, because you become peaceful. You realize that people interpret you through the lens they carry. Someone who expects betrayal may interpret kindness as manipulation. Someone who fears abandonment may interpret distance as rejection. Someone who lacks emotional maturity may interpret boundaries as hostility. Someone who is used to control may interpret independence as disrespect. And you cannot spend your entire life correcting every interpretation. God knows your heart. That is enough. Chosen one. Perhaps J has been watching this transformation from somewhere you cannot see. Maybe they expected you to remain emotionally available. Maybe they expected you to reach out again. Maybe they thought you would eventually break the silence. But you did not. You began rebuilding. You began focusing on yourself. You began spending more time with the people who genuinely value you. You began pursuing goals. You began praying differently. You began recognizing your worth. And without saying anything, your life began communicating a message. I am not waiting for someone to decide whether I am valuable. That message can be powerful. Because when you stop chasing validation, people who once controlled your emotions lose their power. Chosen one, this may be part of what J has been hiding. They may be more affected by your absence than they ever admitted. But again, hear the wisdom in this. Someone missing you does not automatically mean they are ready for you. Someone regretting losing you does not automatically mean they know how to keep you. Someone loving you does not automatically mean they know how to love you well. This is why you cannot build your future on hidden feelings. You build it on demonstrated character. Let that settle deeply into your spirit. Do not build your future on what someone might feel. Build it on what they consistently demonstrate. If J has changed, let the change become visible. If J has matured, let maturity become consistent. If J wants reconciliation, let responsibility accompany the request. If J wants another opportunity, let accountability come with it. You do not need revenge. You need evidence. Not evidence for your ego, evidence for your discernment. Chosen one, God is not asking you to become cynical. There is a difference between wisdom and suspicion. Cynicism says nobody can be trusted. Wisdom says trust must be earned. Cynicism says everyone will hurt you. Wisdom says not everyone deserves immediate access. Cynicism closes every door. Wisdom learns which doors require boundaries. You do not have to become hard because someone was careless with your heart. You do not have to stop believing in love because one person mishandled it. You do not have to become emotionally unavailable because someone made vulnerability feel dangerous. Let the experience make you wiser, not colder. Chosen one, there may also be a hidden truth about yourself that God is revealing through this. You may be discovering that you were more attached to the potential of J than to the reality of J. Think about that. Perhaps you loved who you believed they could become. Perhaps you loved the future you imagined. Perhaps you loved the version of the relationship that existed in your mind. Perhaps you kept waiting for the person to become consistent because you remembered moments when they were. And this is where God may be separating potential from reality. Potential is not the same as character. Promises are not the same as actions. Chemistry is not the same as compatibility. A powerful connection is not automatically a healthy connection. And a person can be significant to your story without being assigned to your future. That truth can be difficult. But it can also be liberating. Because once you stop trying to force potential into reality, you become free to receive what actually exists. Chosen one, perhaps the reason this revelation is coming now is because you are finally strong enough to accept the truth without negotiating with it. There was a time when you might have said, "I don't care what happened, just come back." Now you are beginning to say, if you come back differently. That is growth. There was a time when you might have accepted a few words. Now you want consistency. There was a time when you might have celebrated any attention. Now you ask whether the attention comes with respect. There was a time when you might have chased an explanation. Now you understand that your peace matters more than an answer. This is what God has been building inside you, not desperation. Discernment. Chosen one, perhaps J is approaching a moment of decision too. They may have to decide whether to continue hiding or finally become honest. They may have to decide whether pride is more important than reconciliation. They may have to decide whether fear will continue controlling them. They may have to decide whether they are willing to take responsibility for what happened. And that decision belongs to them. You cannot make it for them. You cannot pray someone into maturity against their will. You can pray for God to touch their heart, but you cannot force their hands. You can pray for clarity, but you cannot manufacture their honesty. You can leave the door unlocked emotionally, but you cannot stand at the door forever. Your life must continue. Chosen one, this is why you are being reminded to keep moving. Do not stop your journey because someone else is still deciding. Do not postpone your happiness. Do not postpone your goals. Do not postpone your healing. Do not postpone your purpose. If J is meant to reconnect with you, they can meet you on the road. You do not have to walk backward to find them. And if God has something completely different prepared, you need to be moving forward so you can recognize it. Because sometimes we pray for God to bring someone back while He is trying to bring something new. Sometimes we keep staring at an old door while God is opening a new one beside us. Sometimes we keep asking why a person left while God is preparing to show us why their departure was necessary. Chosen one, never become so focused on who walked away that you fail to notice what God is bringing closer. There are opportunities you have not seen yet. There are people you have not met yet. There are rooms you have not entered yet. There are conversations you have not had yet. There are versions of yourself you have not become yet. Your story is still unfolding, and J is only one part of a much larger story. Perhaps that is the revelation God wants you to understand. You were never supposed to make one person the center of your destiny. You were supposed to become centered in God. When you become centered in God, people can come and go without taking your identity with them. When you become centered in God, rejection becomes redirection rather than destruction. When you become centered in God, silence becomes an opportunity to listen. When you become centered in God, hidden things no longer terrify you because you trust that whatever needs to be known will be revealed at the right time. Chosen one, there may come a moment when J finally tells you something you never expected to hear. Maybe it begins with, "Never told you the truth." Maybe it begins with, "There was a reason I disappeared." Maybe it begins with, "I was afraid." Maybe it begins with, "I made a mistake." Maybe it begins with, "I still think about you." Maybe it begins with something completely different. Whatever the words are, do not let the shock of finally hearing them override your discernment. Listen, take your time, ask questions if necessary. Observe the heart behind the words. And remember who you became while you were waiting. You are not the same person who once desperately needed that conversation. You have already survived the silence. You have already survived the unanswered questions. You have already survived the uncertainty. You have already learned how to breathe without the explanation. So if the explanation arrives, receive it from a position of strength rather than desperation. Chosen one, perhaps this is the greatest reversal in the entire situation. You once needed J to choose you. Now you are being given the wisdom to decide whether J deserves a place in your life. That is a completely different position. You are no longer standing outside someone's heart begging for permission to enter. You are standing at the threshold of your own future asking, does this belong here? That is maturity. That is discernment. That is freedom. And perhaps J can feel that change. Perhaps that is why their behavior has become strange. Perhaps that is why they seem to appear and disappear. Perhaps that is why they may be testing the waters indirectly. They may want to know whether you are still available. But you do not have to answer every test. You do not have to prove that you still care. You do not have to respond to every subtle signal. If someone wants to speak, let them speak. If someone wants to apologize, let them apologize. If someone wants to make things right, let them take responsibility. You do not have to do the emotional labor for both people. Chosen one, God is teaching you reciprocity. You have spent enough time giving without receiving. You have spent enough time understanding without being understood. You have spent enough time waiting without being met halfway. Your next season requires balance. You cannot continue pouring into empty containers. You cannot continue watering places where nothing is growing. You cannot continue begging for basic respect. And this is not selfishness. This is stewardship. Your heart is valuable. Your time is valuable. Your energy is valuable. Your attention is valuable. Your peace is valuable. Guard them, not because everyone is dangerous, but because everything valuable requires care. Chosen one, perhaps, J, has been hiding the fact that they know this now. They know your value. They may have always known it on some level, but now they understand it differently. Sometimes distance gives people perspective. Sometimes absence reveals importance. Sometimes losing access forces someone to recognize what they had. But again, let their realization be their realization. Do not rush to make it easier for them. Let them sit with it. Let them learn from it. Let them decide what kind of person they want to become. You are not their punishment. You are not their reward. You are not responsible for whether they regret their choices. You are responsible for what you do with the wisdom God gives you. Chosen one, there is another layer to this message that you need to understand. Sometimes God reveals what someone has been hiding because he is protecting you from accepting a false narrative about yourself. Maybe J made you believe you were too demanding. Maybe they made you feel like your expectations were unreasonable. Maybe they convinced you that communication was too much to ask. Maybe they treated your boundaries as problems. Maybe they made you question whether you deserved consistency. And now you are beginning to realize that your standards were never the problem. The problem was that you were trying to build something with someone who did not share those standards. That is not a failure of your worth. That is a mismatch. And recognizing a mismatch is wisdom. Chosen one, never apologize for needing honesty. Never apologize for wanting peace. Never apologize for expecting respect. Never apologize for wanting someone's actions to match their words. You do not need to become easier to disappoint just so someone can feel better about disappointing you. You do not need to lower your standards to make another person's inconsistency acceptable. You do not need to call confusion passion. You do not need to call emotional instability intensity. You do not need to call absence mystery. Sometimes what looks mysterious is simply inconsistent. And sometimes what feels complicated is simply a lack of willingness. That is why God is giving you eyes to see beyond the surface. Chosen one may have hidden something from you, but there is one thing that cannot remain hidden: the fruit of a person's choices. Eventually, choices produce consequences. Eventually, intentions become patterns. Eventually, patterns become character, and character becomes visible. You do not need to predict it. You only need to observe it. This is your season of observation, not obsession. Observation. Watch what happens when you stop chasing. Watch what happens when you establish boundaries. Watch what happens when you stop explaining. Watch what happens when you focus on your own purpose. Watch who respects your growth and who becomes uncomfortable with it. Watch who celebrates your progress and who tries to pull you back into old patterns. Watch who approaches you with sincerity and who approaches only when they need something. God may reveal more through what people do after you change than through anything they said before you changed. Chosen one, this is why the transformation inside you is so important. Your new boundaries are revealing old relationships. Your new standards are revealing old compromises. Your new confidence is revealing old insecurities. Your new peace is revealing what used to disturb you. And your new discernment is revealing what your old desperation once concealed. That is powerful. You are not merely waiting for revelation. You are becoming capable of recognizing it. And perhaps that is the real reason this message has reached you now. Because the truth is not useful if you are unwilling to act on it. Knowledge without wisdom can become another burden, but revelation followed by wisdom becomes freedom. Chosen one, so when the hidden thing about J comes into the light, do not ask only, what does this mean about them? And ask, what does this mean for me? What boundary needs to be strengthened? What belief needs to be released? What wound needs to be healed? What decision needs to be made? What pattern needs to end? What standard needs to remain? What new door needs to be considered? Those questions will take you deeper than simply wondering whether J loves you. Because your destiny is bigger than being loved by one person. Your destiny involves becoming who you were created to become, and sometimes a person enters your life to awaken something in you that would have remained asleep without the experience. Maybe J awakened your desire for deeper love. Maybe J awakened your courage. Maybe J awakened your boundaries. Maybe J awakened your spirituality. Maybe J awakened your ability to recognize your own worth. And perhaps that is why the connection mattered even if the outcome did not become what you originally imagined. Something can be meaningful without being permanent. Something can change you without remaining with you. Something can be part of your story without becoming the ending. Chosen one, let that truth give you peace as the hidden pieces begin to surface, because you are not being asked to predict the ending today. You are being asked to stay awake, stay discerning, stay grounded, and continue walking while God reveals what you could not see before. There may be another conversation coming, another unexpected encounter, another piece of information, another change in behavior, another moment when J realizes that the silence can no longer protect what has been hidden. And when that moment arrives, you will need to remember everything this season has taught you, because the revelation may not come in the form you expected, and the words may not sound the way you imagined. But something will become unmistakably clear when the time is right, and you will recognize it not because you forced it to happen, but because you have become quiet enough to see what was there all along.